Austin. How you doing?
Good, Dad. How are you?
Good. I'm excited for our guest today. Our journey is going to take us inside the heart and mind of a Major League Baseball player, author, and broadcaster. He was on 19 teams, Austin, 54 moves over a 14-year period. LSU record holder, College World Series champion, Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, Major League All-Star pitcher, and voted nicest guy in baseball by his players. But this is a story about a resilient faith and the ability to adapt and overcome setbacks. My name is Ken Karcher, and I'll be your host, and alongside me is my son, Austin. And today we'd like to welcome Paul Byrd as our guest to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, thanks, guys. This is my first ever father-son podcast. So, yeah, I've
There
never
we go.
done one of these before. That's pretty good stuff.
Well, we're glad to have you. And Paul, let's go back to when you were growing up as a kid, I think in Kentucky, if I'm right. And just
Yeah, yeah.
tell us about your family and brothers, sisters, etc.
Yeah, so I have, well, first of all, my mom got pregnant, and she's late 30s, and she wasn't sure if she was going through menopause, and this is, 1970, and so she went to the doctor, and the doctor says, "You're not going through menopause, you're pregnant." Now, at this time, she has, a son who's 16, a son 18, and a daughter who's 20. So she thought she was, done. And so she had me, and she's 39, and I'm thinking, you know, super thankful she had me because the doctor, this is pre Roe versus Wade, but he was warming up a needle, and he said, "You can stop crying. I'm going to give you this shot. You'll miscarry tomorrow morning." So that's the way they did it back in those days. And my mom said, "I'm going to do it all over again." She said, "I'm having my baby." So I love my mom.
Yes,
She
yes.
didn't have to say yes, so that was good stuff. But I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. It was horses, whiskey, basketball, and the great bluegrass state. So I grew up breaking lamps, throwing tennis balls around the living room. My dad was a police officer. My mom worked for Kentucky Medical Association. They knew nothing about baseball, and it was just my passion. So I watched the Cincinnati Reds on TV, would imitate pitchers, and nurture versus nature. I guess it depends on the person. But for me, baseball was just in my nature and what I wanted to do, and by far my favorite sport.
Hmm.
Paul, when you look back at growing up in the Byrd home, what is one thing that has influenced you even today from growing up in that home?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, Both my parents worked and worked hard, so I think I learned that probably as much as anything. My mom was constantly helping out with schools, working. My dad was worked for the police department, and that was a really tough job. He was a detective of homicide, so he walked over dead bodies. This is the coming out of the civil rights era. So he did 3 crime scenes a day on average where someone was murdered.
Wow.
And he was on the force for 20, but he did that specific job for 6. And they only let you do that now for 2, now that we know about post-traumatic stress and other things. But I think I didn't really appreciate how hard that job was until I was older. So a lot of respect for my dad, first responders. Um, Guys, this is my office right here. Got some baseball stuff here. I apologize for the Phillies jersey, but I made the All-Star team on the Phillies. So, and then, and I love the Phillies, man. They're great to me. And that's George Brett. When I was on the Royals, he said something that was very impactful to me. So I have a jersey of his. And then we're on a farm here in Georgia. I'm looking out my window, and there's some deer right now, and there's a little baby fawn that was just born probably in the last day or two. I'm very happy to be in this environment. My point in saying all this is through the woods. My wife runs the Byrdhouse Ministries, which is a cabin on 6 acres, and she sees people and does silent retreats, soul rests, and does counseling. and she herself is a spiritual director and organizes a lot of this stuff up. And it's really cool because we did not start out to see first responders, but the Lord has just shifted that. And now we see widows, we see people who have lost a child, we see firemen, we see police officers. And when we see first responders, I think of my dad. And it's very, it's full circle for me. So in a way, I feel like I can heal some, I don't know, in a weird way, his wounds, my wounds that came about because that was such a difficult job. It led to a lot of trauma in our household when he got home. And so, you know, when you ask me what I learned a lot of great things in my house growing up, but like most, there was pain and it was dysfunctional. And someone told me, if you don't know what a dysfunctional household is, just look at your own and you'll learn, because we're all messed up on some level.
Yeah. My wife says to this day, Paul, that we're a beautiful mess.
That's it.
Well, I hope you're enjoying our podcast today, but I'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsors. Our nonprofit organization, the Win Awakening, is the reason we're able to have this podcast. The Win Awakening is a sports ministry network that began in November of 2022. The Win mission is to encourage and empower leaders to live from a place of victory as they awaken to their wholeness and true identity within environments where they can be known. Our goal is to create safe environments where transparency and vulnerability are accepted and value and worth are recognized in an atmosphere of love. If you'd like to support the Win Awakening, as well as our podcast, you can donate now at winawakening.org, and please spread the word about our ministry with your friends. Don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe to Awaken Kingdom Culture on our Spotify and YouTube channels to listen or watch our podcast weekly, every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Eastern. And if you'd like to follow my socials, as well as hear about the upcoming podcast news, watch the latest clips, and get an inside look at my life behind the scenes, you can follow us on Instagram at Awaken Kingdom Culture and Facebook, Awaken Kingdom Culture Podcast. Well, let's get back to the podcast. Okay,
So Paul, you were starting to talk about your relationship with your dad. Was there a memorable moment or conversation that you had with him growing up?
Yeah, so my dad is the first person that told me I could do it. And my dad was very pessimistic and very cynical. And that's something that happens with you when you're in, first responder type role where there's a lot of trauma or this and that. You're constantly looking, you're alert, like somebody coming back from war. You sit at a certain side of the room. You want to know where the door is, your options, your exit plan. You want to know. So my dad was always evaluating everybody and everything, and he saw the negative in everything. And a coach in high school asked us to fill out goals. And so I did. I wrote my goal sheet. My goal was to play Major League Baseball. And, this was a basketball coach and all this. And so he told me that I wasn't big enough to play pro baseball, and I really wasn't big enough to play major D1 college because I wanted to go to Arizona State. That was also on my goal list. And I got in the car afterwards after he said I needed to go to a small school and concentrate on my education. And he was just looking out for me, But I said that to my dad, and my dad just lost it. Just absolutely lost it. And I mean, almost crashed the car. And he's like, he hasn't even seen you play. Are you kidding me? And he's just going nuts. And he's like, that is not true. And he's like, son, you have what it takes. You can play in the big leagues if you want to and you work hard enough and all of this. And so by the next year, I'd gotten a scholarship to Arizona State. And, I got drafted by the Reds out of high school, and I ended up playing 14 years. But you just need one person to believe in you.
Yeah.
One person who has authority in your life, who you trust to believe in you. And my dad was so negative that when he was overflowingly positive, I knew he was telling the truth and on his opinion. He wasn't going to sugarcoat it with me. And that was life changing for me. And I've always felt that way in the big leagues because so many people continue to say, yeah, I'm 6 foot. I'm not like, 6'4" or 5", like many pitchers. And I didn't throw hard. So if you're not very big or tall, you have to throw hard. And
Yeah.
I didn't do either. So there was this thinking of, this guy's not really a major leaguer. And so I've always remembered that. And if one scout or one team believed in me, that was all I needed. And, this is a podcast about faith. And I
Yeah.
think that's always been true of the Lord,
Mm.
So many people tell you, you're unclean. You're not good enough. You're not, you don't measure up. And there's one person who says you are, and that's all you need, So to
It makes me
fight
think
off.
of I was just going to say, it makes me think of the 2 spies or the 12 spies that go into the promised land, and 10
Yeah.
come back with negative perspective, and 2 come back with a positive, and it's all based on how they viewed God in that situation. And
Yeah. And what they saw.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
I think
Paul, you mentioned faith. What role did faith play in your home growing up?
Yeah, so my mom took me to church, and my mom raised me Catholic, and my dad grew up Pentecostal, and he was not a big fan of church, and thought there was a lot of it was fake. And my mom grew up Baptist, and my brothers and my sister were from a previous marriage. And so I'm my father's only child. So she could not get married in the Baptist church again. And she had a Catholic nun who built into her in high school and sent her to Mercy Academy. And she always remembered that. And she could get remarried again in the Catholic Church. So she did. And so we became Catholic, and that was my genesis of faith, and sitting in a pew and seeing Jesus hanging on the cross, listening to the priest give the homily, going to Catholic grade school and high school. To this day, I love all faiths that believe in Jesus and people. And so, yeah, that was my origin.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So jumping to your high school,
Yeah.
tell us kind of about your experience in high school, all the sports you played, and then you mentioned your dad, but who maybe else was an influence in your high school career and playing career?
So I had a good high school coach, Joe White, who cared. And he drugged the field with the tractor. And when I went to an Arizona State baseball camp, he came with me, which is unusual for a high school coach, and just invested in me, believed in me, showed me my curveball grip. And then when I was in high school, I went to University of Kentucky baseball camps where Keith Madison, who's become a good friend of mine over the years, he also built into me, and he said, "You're really good." And that's when I started to realize, like, because, I'm not in Texas, I'm not in Florida, I'm not in California where a lot of baseball players come from. I'm in Kentucky. And so to have someone like Keith Madison, who had played pro ball, tell me how good I was, that was very influential in my life. And, it goes back again to believing that you're good enough, and not just hearing that, but actually taking that in and believing what somebody says about you. And that if baseball is 80 or 90% mental, then confidence is going to be enormous in that, and you need that. So, yeah.
What do you have a favorite high school memory?
Man. I remember when I was a sophomore, my first at bat on varsity, and they usually don't play varsity. My school was huge. I mean, it was, shoot, at that time, it was over like around 1,500. And so nobody played varsity as a freshman or sophomore. And I had a friend, Tab Brown, who actually played. We played summer league together, and he was also very good. And he ended up getting drafted in the sandwich pick first round for the Braves. But we made the varsity. He was a freshman, I was a sophomore, and my first at bat, they put me in the game late in the game, and I absolutely crushed a home run and running around the bases as a sophomore felt really good. And the
Wow.
next day you're in class and they announce everything that happened over the announcements before the game, and they announced me as hitting a home run, and everybody dapped me up, and that was a cool feeling.
That's awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
Paul, you mentioned Arizona State, but as we know, you don't go to Arizona State. Tell us about your college experience and where you went and people that influenced you there.
Yeah, so I was going to go to Arizona State. It was a done deal. They're number one in the country. I think they're 21-1 or something. I go out there to Arizona State for my official visit as a senior, and they lose 3 in a row. And the coach doesn't talk to any of the recruits, including me. And I was like, man, I don't know if I want to play for this guy. Like, it just felt weird. But I loved everything else about Arizona State, and I was probably, still going to go there. And I went to LSU just because I saw them in the College World Series, and I knew they had a good team. So I go down to LSU, and that coach is brilliant. He is a master recruiter. His name's Skip Bertman. He won 6 national titles, Hall of Fame coach. Everywhere else I went, they acted like you should be privileged to come here. Like, we're going to win with or without you. We hope you come.
Yeah.
And that was the standard recruiting. And so Coach Bertman was totally different. And he said, if you don't come here, I'm going to lose my job and the program's going to fall apart. And, now looking back on it, I understood the value of somebody wanting you. And I felt like, oh, wow, man, I remember telling my mom, I got to come here or the program's going to fall apart. And she's like, what? You're going to Arizona State. And I committed to play there within 10 minutes. And
Wow.
that's where it was one of the greatest moves I've ever made, because I found my faith at LSU. I met my wife at LSU. We won a national championship at LSU. That coach wasn't actually the greatest with mechanics, but I learned how to think at LSU. To this day, he is the greatest motivational speaker I ever played for. And I played for many coaches in the big leagues who are going to be Hall of Famers, but he was the best motivational speaker. He could have you ready to run through a brick wall. It was just unbelievable. I eventually called him Hannibal Lecter because I said, Coach, I think, the Silence of the Lambs movie, I was like, Coach, I think you're really a psychologist. And I think you can talk someone into swallowing their own tongue. Like, that's how good you are. Because every time you finish giving a pep talk, like, we'll do whatever you want. We'll do, we're ready to go. Play with our hair on fire, it doesn't matter. And so he got us all on the same page, and we won it all in 1991, winning the College World Series, which happened 34 years ago today. On this day, we won the College World Series. So, yeah. So all of my guys are, texting me and, on that team, and we're reminiscing. I can't believe it was that long ago, but we won the first, and then it was an avalanche, and they were the most dominant team of the 90s until the early 2000s when he retired, and they've still won a couple more after that. But, incredible person. Yeah, incredible coach.
It's interesting, Paul. We have a little bit in common. My older brother pitched at LSU for Jack LeMay. I don't know if you know that name, back in the early 80s. And then
very well. Yeah.
And then Skip Bertram offered me to play baseball at Miami when he was at Miami. So we have a little bit of a tie together there in this family of mine and yours. So,
You were holding back on me.
but
I had no idea. Yeah.
yeah. And so you mentioned in that time at LSU is when you really came to know your faith. Tell us about that.
Mm, yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with, I'll say, denominations or what have you. I just miss the message of giving your life to Jesus, fully trusting him, believing him, personal relationship. And, I prayed to Jesus. I talked to Jesus. I, you know, said sort of some artificial prayers,
Mm.
and, but had I ever really like trusted and surrendered and given over my life? I don't know. I would say no. Like I don't know when I came to Christ. I really don't. I really don't. I said the prayer to receive Jesus 35 times at LSU. And, I wrote about this in a book. So I hope, this is okay that I share this. But
Oh, 100%.
yeah, I was struggling with pornography at that time in my life and didn't even know it was wrong or bad. It
Yeah.
was like, I mean, it was in the locker room. Isn't that what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, we all wanted to be like James Bond, you drive fast cars, you drink alcohol, and you're supposed to like girls, right? So that was a very confusing time in my life when I started to learn that certain things were like wrong and started to become convicted on things and started to be strangely attracted to Jesus, even though I couldn't explain like why. So I heard the purity of the gospel. There was a movie, Hellraiser, in the late 80s. I don't know if you remember this guy, Pinhead, but he had all
Oh,
these
yeah.
pins,
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And I was like, is there really a place called hell? And, the guy who led me to Christ was Wayne Waddell at LSU, and he was with Campus Crusade for Christ. And at that time, they had kind of the little booklet, The Four Spiritual Laws, which was like the
Oh,
street
yeah.
preacher version of, man is sinful and separated from God. And I had just never heard any of that. It sounded like maybe way too serious. And like, I pray to Jesus, I talk to Jesus, but I don't want to be into it too much. Like, this is, like you may be in a cult.
Yeah.
So those were the thoughts that ran through my mind in college. And, when you're in college, it's your first time out of the house. So you're like in that transition of becoming an adult. And, I've learned now through the ministry and through certain things, my wife, degree in psychology and all that. And like your brain isn't even fully physically developed until you're 25.
Right.
So, you're trying to figure out a lot of things. My dad struggled with alcohol. My dad was abusive. My dad was also my best friend. My dad also spent a lot of time with me. So one of my goals in life was to not become an alcoholic and to be a good person. So when he told me that wasn't good enough, Wayne Waddell, I was like, what are you talking about? And so he's talked about the importance of relying on Jesus to be good enough, and you're never going to be good enough, and you have to trust him and put everything on him. I was like, no, God helps those who help themselves. That's not true. So we battled for 3 years, and he challenged me to read the Bible, and which I did. And so I had this wrestling match with Jesus over those 3 years, and would go to the crusade meetings, but then also had a big foot in the world, and I was very arrogant and wanted to make it to the big leagues. So I was very focused on that as well. So that was kind of the genesis of my faith. And when I said the prayer, and then I would struggle with pornography or pulling against my teammates, so that I would get drafted higher, or, somebody I didn't like, and that felt awful. I was just like, well, I'm not a Christian. I'm not because the prayer didn't take. or God doesn't want me, or, you fill in the blank. And I remember in double A one time, I baptized myself because I read where you had to be baptized. And so I took the ice bucket in the hotel room and went down to went over to the bathtub and just
Yeah.
baptized myself. And I was literally like, I was literally crying, and I think the
Mm.
Lord was like, I gotta tell this guy he's okay. And I was just flooded with these feelings of like, relax,
Yeah.
relax, like you're a Christian.
Yes.
You are a Christian, or you wouldn't not want to sin, or you wouldn't talk to
Right.
me, or you wouldn't say the prayer 35 times. And I just realized in that moment, I think that a Christian is not someone who's perfect. It's somebody
Mm.
that listens and talks to and has a relationship with Jesus, apart from the works, apart
Yes.
from what you do.
Mm.
Because there's people
Well
who,
said.
yes, people in scripture, I know I'm talking a lot, guys, but there's people who come to him and say, hey, didn't we do this? Didn't we do this? Didn't we cast out demons in your name? And that's pretty
Yeah.
strong accomplishments, but it's all about what they did.
Yep.
And Jesus says, I never knew you. And
Oh,
there's something about knowing, having a relationship and knowing him, and not what you did, even if they're great Christian things.
Yes.
Um, I'm done.
We talk a lot. We talk a lot with coaches and people that are involved in the ministry, and because
Yeah,
we're very similar to what you and your wife are doing now, and it's part of our dreams too. But we'll get to that later. It's just helping people understand, like you said so well, Paul. It's not what we do; it's who we be, and it's
yeah,
discovering what is already inside of us and
yes,
living from what we already have.
yeah,
And you said that so well. Well,
and
let's jump. Go
it
ahead.
just also it's such a great, we live in this, especially the sports world, where it's all about what we do and how we
yes,
perform. That's
yes,
how people look at us and value us. So when someone sits there and says, God did it all. He loved you so
yeah,
much that he sent his son and he paid the price without you doing anything. It was actually in the midst of your sin, and it's in the midst of your imperfections.
yeah,
And so for us in this world and the thinking we're accustomed to, it's very hard for us just to say, I believe it, I accept it, I receive that free gift that you're giving me. And
yeah,
because we don't receive it or believe it, it affects our ability to experience what he has for us. And I just think you just did such an eloquent job describing that process. Like, you're not really sure why you keep going back and having these conversations, but there's something
yeah,
unique. There's that relationship that draws you back to keep trying to search. And the mystery, or that life, is found in knowing him. When you know who he is and how he interacts with people and how he um, tries to know the heart of every creation here on this earth, that changes the way we view him, and then it allows us to view people differently, and then it just starts flowing out of you, those works that we were once trying to do by ourselves.
yeah.
So
Paul, we're going to jump to
Wow.
your Major League Baseball career, and the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask you about some moments or memories in your career, and then also if there's key people that met you along the way in these moments and memories, I'd like you to share some of them who've have impacted.
Oh
Like
man.
I found a quote. Everyone knows who this manager is, but I found a quote from Bobby Cox. It says, "Paul's one of the most creative pitchers in getting hitters out." What made you so
Yes.
creative, Paul?
I just did different things. I just decided to be me, and so I swung my arms like old school delivery to try and just delay the timing, get a little rhythm. Again, I had shoulder surgery, so
Mm.
I lost velocity on my fastball, and so I was kind of conventional, and then I was getting ready to be released with this team right here with the Royals. and I was in spring training in 2002. And the only thing creative I did at that point is I came set and I was a little hunched over. And so I was in flip-flops into the day. We're at Boardwalk and Baseball, which is 30 minutes south of Orlando at that time, an amusement park where the Royals had spring training. And I hopped the fences on these mounds, and I just started praying. And I just said, God, I'll go wherever you want me to go. But if I have any choice in this, I would like to stay in the big leagues. So if it's up to you, but if you don't care, I would like to stay in the big leagues. And I'm nearing the end. And you know that because when you walk in the locker room, coaches stop talking to you. You just don't have it anymore. I'm throwing 81 miles an hour. I mean, that doesn't make a high school team. And I'm trying to get out guys in the big leagues by being hunched over. That's not. So I started swinging my arms. I thought of like Warren Spahn, high leg kick, and I lifted my leg and I actually fell over. Somebody on the grounds crew came over. They thought I was some crazy fan. So, I said, no, I play for the team. I just, whatever. So, and I should, who's working on dry work and flip-flops? But I started, like I said, swinging my arms, and then I altered my leg kick. I went over on the side, and then I stood straight up, and then I threw sidearm, then I threw over the top, and I just started free-flowing, It was kind of dancing. And the next day, I took some of that into what's called pitcher's practice, where you're pitching to the hitters, and it's a simulated game. And hitters will just stand in and try to get their work in, too. You have the choice of telling them what's coming. Well, I moved the screen in front of me. So now I'm naked in front of the pitcher because if he hits a line drive at me, there's no screen to stop it. And that's dangerous during pitching practice when everybody's working on stuff. But I needed to do that so I could throw sidearm. I started doing my arms and people started laughing. And then they were like, is he serious? And then they were like, okay. And then there was some pop-ups and like some ground outs and some missed hits. And then Carlos Beltran was in my group.
Yeah.
And I finished and I started walking off the field and he came over to me. I can't do his Latin accent, but he walked over. He just said, hey, man, he goes, I don't know if you were just joking around. He goes, but you need to keep doing that. He said, I couldn't pick up the ball. And I was like, great. And then George Brett came over to me and he said, hey, man, I would have hated facing you. And I said, what? Like, you're George Brett. You would have loved facing me. Trust me. Didn't check your numbers. And he just said, no, he said, I like 95, straight and hard. He goes, you cut it, you sink it, you change arm angles. And he's like, man, he goes, keep doing what you're doing. He goes, I would have hated facing you. And that's that moment again. I never know what I'm going to talk about when I come on podcasts or certain things, but it feels like the theme of this podcast is, that one person that believes in you and you have the choice to receive what they say about you, whether it's Jesus saying my righteous is good enough for you, or whether it's my dad saying you can play in the big leagues, or whether after you get to the big leagues and you're about to be released, a Hall of Famer like George Brett comes over and says, I would have hated facing you. I can think he's lying to me to just be nice and build me up, or I can say, maybe he would have. And if I can get George Brett out and George Brett would have hated facing me, maybe some other people would have too. So I carried that into the game that year. And, my plan when I prayed to God was lightning would hit me and I would start throwing 99 miles an hour and testify.
Isn't that how we think?
Right. This is my plan. I testify of your greatness amongst everybody. And God just is, his ways are not our ways. So he's like, you're going to pitch in pain this year. You're going to have to depend upon me all the time. And it's going to be really hard. And you're not going to throw 98. You're going to throw 85, 86, 87. And, so I did gain a little bit of velocity, but I gained sneakiness. And then that became my trademark, being creative. So when the Braves signed me after that year, that's why Bobby Cox said that. And I would choose some different things, like I stepped behind the rubber on my changeup. So Major League Baseball didn't know what to do with that. Like, nobody had ever done that in the game. So they had to call a meeting with all the umpires to decide if they were going to allow me to do that. And the rule states that you have to have some part of your foot in touch with the rubber when you release the baseball. It doesn't say you have to be in front of it. So they granted me and allowed me to stand behind the rubber on my changeups. And to do that, I had to cover up the rubber with dirt. So the first base coach didn't relay to the hitter and certain things like that, which some umpires were okay with, some were not. But there was just little things like that that people hadn't seen, and they're like, this guy's different. So that creativity became my trademark.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful.
You
That's cool.
gotta be careful when you ask me a question, guys. I'll give you a long answer if you don't watch it. So
no. We're just in conversation. Wherever this goes, and that because we believe in the movement of the Spirit, and the Spirit takes it where it needs to go, and it's going to be exactly what this podcast needs to be. And that's the beauty of people's stories, because there's so many cool things. I mean, God is so unique and so creative in each of us that if we open up the platform for you to share what He's putting on your heart in that moment, who knows where this thing will go, and we trust that He's going to touch who it's supposed to touch. Talk to us about that George Brett jersey. What did he sign on there?
He said, "Birdie, you soar like an eagle. My best, 2002." I think I have it. Let's see here, guys. My little barn. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know I was going to tell that story, but I'm looking for somewhere in here. I have a jar of sand.
Yeah.
And that sand is from the mound where I discovered my windup. And I drove back when I was playing for the Indians. They're in Winter Haven, which is reasonably close to Boardwalk and Baseball. And Boardwalk and Baseball was being torn down at that time. So I drove back and grabbed sand from, dirt from the mound from where I discovered my delivery. And so it's kind of something to remind me that, God answered.
I love it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's
but
awesome.
I can't find it. So maybe it's in my little barn. I got a hermitage on the property. We would go down. We have little small groups and stuff, and I think it's down there. Anyways.
That's awesome. So, obviously you've done, a lot in baseball. What are some, and maybe whatever the Spirit puts on your heart today, what are moments and memories within that journey, on top of what you already shared, that either God showed up, sticks out just because it was a great memory, a relationship. What are some things that you look back and you say, wow, God, thank you for allowing this to be part of it?
There's so many. So many. This jersey on the Phillies over here, that's my All-Star game jersey. So I was in 1998, I'm in AAA for the Braves, and they take me off the roster. And so the Phillies claim me. They put in a waiver claim for me. They had to pay $25,000 to claim me. So they pay $25,000 and they claim me. They go to send me to AAA. MLB says he can't go to AAA unless you want to put him through the waiver process again. And if somebody pays $25,000 and claims him, then you lose yours. And they said, man, we made a mistake. So they said, well, you can't get your money back. So you got to decide what to do. So they go, okay, all right. So we don't want to lose our $25,000. So they go, we got to send him to the big leagues. So they call me and they said, hey, we're being honest with you. We called you to send you to AAA. And I'm thinking, why did you even claim me? I'd had 2 years I had a year and a half with the Mets in the big leagues and a year with the Braves. And the Phillies at that time didn't have great pitching. And I was like, I mean, I could at least pitch in Earl's bullpen right now or whatever. But he goes, it was Ed Wade was the general manager, and he says, we're being honest with you. We know it's not what you want to hear, but we were going to send you to AAA. We thought next year maybe you had a chance to make our bullpen team, and we just needed a player in AAA. I was like, okay. So I don't really think a lot of you when they say stuff like that. And so he said, we're going to send you to the big leagues. And he said, you're going to make one start, or he said, you're going to pitch, you're going to get called up for one day and pitch, and then we're going to decide what to do with you. So this is a good story. So he calls me back, and he actually talks to my wife. I'm going to get the U-Haul, and he said to my wife, Kim, he said, tell your husband he's pitching Monday night against Randy Johnson, one of our starters. Yeah, he goes, one of our
with
starters.
The Mariners? Was he with the Mariners at that point? Or
he had just gotten traded to Houston. He hadn't lost. He was just like on fire that year. And so he said, tell him just to go have fun. And I was like, okay. So I get back and my wife goes, you're pitching against Randy Johnson on Monday. And I'm like, what? So it was a really, really cool moment. I walked in the locker room and I didn't even have red shoes. I didn't have a bat. Greg Jeffries gave me a bat and he goes, yeah, you can swing my bat, swing whichever one you want. I go, I don't want to break one of your good bats, man. Just give me one that's not any good. He goes, I really don't care what bat you're going to use because you're not going to make contact. So you're not breaking anything. And I was like, okay, thanks for the confidence, man. He goes, hey, just go have fun. I was like, okay. So then, I go in the office and meet Terry Francona, and he's great, man. I love Terry Francona, like instrumental in my life. So he told me to go have fun. He's like, I asked around the locker room, what can we expect from you? And nobody remembers you. And I was like, I'd pitched 2 years in the big leagues, right? And two of those guys in the locker room were my teammates on the Mets and on the Indians. So if they don't remember me, that's not a good sign that you made any sort of impression. They're just being nice, saying, hey, this guy's not very good. So expectations were really, really low. But I prayed, to the Lord, and there was a priest who had built into me in high school. His name was John Dietrich, and I told him I wanted to beat him 1-0. And he's like, kind of like, okay. I was like, man, I know the David and Goliath story. God can do anything he wants. So I went out, and in the third inning, I came up to the plate. Randy Johnson's throwing, 100 miles an hour. Nobody's touching him. We somehow have Mark Lewis on second. I don't remember how he got there. Maybe a walk or something. I don't know. But I saw the first pitch, and I was like, I can hit that. It doesn't look that hard. And then the second pitch, I swung at it, and the ball was in the mitt by the time I swung. So it was actually like an optical illusion. He was so tall, and he let the ball go so late that it just, like I said, an illusion. It just blew by people. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I get it now. So I was like, man, I need to really start my swing early. So I'm then, fouled one off or something. And I'm like, God, I got to start it earlier. So I started incredibly early. Like the ball's just like coming out of his hand. I'm just swinging. And he, so next thing you know, man, I get a hit and it goes over shortstop for a base hit. Mark Lewis scores. I run down to first like chariots of fire, in slow motion, like in a dream. I round first, hand Brad Mills my batting gloves like I've done it 100 times. Try to act cool. Inside and just going crazy. And I beat him. I throw 4-0. We win a 4-0. I throw a shutout. And the next day, I'm riding the bike in the weight room, and Randy Johnson comes in, and he's like, and he goes, man, you got me. And I said, Randy, man, I can believe I pitched okay because it's what I do, but I'm not a hitter, man. He goes, I can't believe I hit your fastball. And he goes, Paul, that was a slider. And I go, what? And he goes, yeah, this is a slider. I was like, oh man. So yeah, it's your slider. That's what I meant, you know. So I go and watch the video in the locker room of my at bat right when he left, and sure enough, not only was I late for his fastball, but I was a foot under the ball when I swung, and the ball broke down and hit my bat and went over shortstop. So I didn't hit his fastball. Never would have hit his fastball, but that was a great moment in my career. And the papers, you know, the media said, we can't send this guy down. You know, we can't, whatever. So they gave me one more start, and I pitched a complete game against the Colorado Rockies and only gave up a run. And then they left me in the rotation, and the next year I made the All-Star team. And so that was,
Wow.
yeah, so when I see things like that, I know God can do the improbable. I really wasn't, I don't mean to put myself down, but there was nothing about me that was like, oh, he's the best at this. He has the best changeup, or he has the best slider, or he has the best two-seamer or fastball or whatever. I didn't have anything special. I think I just believed when I threw my pitches that I was good enough, and was started to become a little creative and survive. So, you know, playing
Just
14
listening to
years.
you, just listening to you talk about just your career. Every time you start talking, it's just I just hear spiritual things flowing
Yeah,
out of you. Like just you know, I think God loves to use what we would call weakness in this world, or things that
yeah,
don't stand out in this world, because it
yeah.
magnifies who He is. And
Hmm.
like you said, your greatest strength is your belief. Your ability to believe that you had everything you needed in that moment.
Yeah,
And I think spiritually, from that standpoint, when we recognize that, hey, I might not fit the bill for what everyone in this world measures, when I'm filled with Him and I believe that I have Him with me, I can walk into any circumstance, regardless of what you think,
yeah,
and special things can happen. And like you said, you go from what they would consider an accident, which I would call, God's hand at complete work,
right,
bringing you into
right.
something, but then rewarding you with such a beautiful thing that you can hang on your wall and say that this means so much more than just a jersey to me. This is
Yeah,
the hand of God at work, bringing me to a point in my career that, I got rewarded for just taking one step at a time. So
yeah,
I don't know. I was just really encouraged. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah. I
Paul,
appreciate you saying that.
you talked earlier about a book you wrote, Free Bird, I think is the title,
Yes,
The
yes,
Power of a Liberated Life.
yes.
Describe to us a little bit about your faith journey in that book and some of the personal challenges that you faced. What made you write the book?
Yeah, so it started out as a living will. I was writing to my kids. My youngest son had a friend. Her name was Jane, and Jane's father was an author. So I says, "Yeah, I've started writing." He goes, "Man, I'd love to read some." So I showed him some of it, and he said, "This needs to be a book." So he got me an agent, and next thing you know, I had a book deal, and it was a memoir that I wrote. And I think that's something I'm proud of, because I struggled with insomnia for a lot of my career.
Hmm.
Um, my brain just doesn't want to shut off. And so at that time in my life, I did a lot of my writing when I couldn't sleep, and wrote about lessons, for my kids. And then I just kind of switched it to be for everybody, and something that my kids could read so that they would know my story. And there's such a power in not just knowing your story, but writing about it. Doesn't have to be to become a book, or doesn't have to be for your kids, but just to write something down is really powerful, and to record things that you feel. And so yeah, so that's, I wrote about that, beating Randy Johnson. um, I wrote about my struggle with my porn addiction that had followed me, and I didn't really realize. I thought it was a good old American way. So I didn't know that that would follow me into adulthood, and in a marriage that um, would would hurt our marriage. And um, I learned later through counseling that was actually about my dad. And I was like, but
Wow.
when my dad would rage because of his trauma and drink, and we would be scared. And so I would retreat to the basement and had learned how to rig the cable box to get the Playboy channel. So it was about dopamine. It was about addiction. It was about a feeling of safety. It was about where I would retreat to when I felt pressure. Well, that's all the big leagues is pressure. And so it had become like alcohol or like any addiction. It had become something that I was dependent upon without knowing it. And it was a gross, disgusting sin. But I found when I told people about it, the power of shame when you expose something starts to go away. And I knew everybody wasn't going to clap and say, great job, but that's okay. My wife forgave me, and I write about that in the book and how powerful that was, because that's how we had our first child, was the night I confessed to her, and she forgave me, which I thought we were going to get divorced or at least be separated, and I didn't even unpack my bags because I came home from a trip from Montreal and I was playing for the Mets, and that started the process of healing in me and started the journey of overcoming addiction. And then so when I put that in the book, that got a lot of people that started writing me, male and female, and that was very powerful. And I had wives who told me thank you because they put my book in their husband's bag when he went on a trip, and it changed their marriage. Stuff like that made me feel really good. And then I cover a little bit, just touch on it, the new covenant in there, which is who you are in Christ, and actually believing that God likes you and that you do measure up. A lot of stuff we don't really, depending on where you go and grow up and hear and all that, we don't really, that message is not a guarantee. And I would say, so there's some new covenant theology in there. I'm really big on chewing on the text, diving in. So I'm sort of an apologetic guy, apologist, but I'm also a spiritual director. So as I've gotten older, I've gotten much more in touch with mystery and sitting in silence and listening. And I've had quite a journey. So I can go either. And I'm really proud of that. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
That's awesome. How did your faith help you navigate the highs and lows of your career?
So I learned this as a spiritual director. The greatest thing you can ever tell someone who is hurting, and they do studies on this. So one of the best things you can do is just listen to someone. And if you give them advice and you tell them how to feel or how to think or give them a Bible verse, that's not listening. You're actually entering into a role of counseling. And that's fine. And there's a place for that. But you create new neural pathways in the brain when you just listen to someone and you empathize with them. And so I believe that's why Jesus, knowing he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead, empathizes with Mary and sits with her in her pain over the death of her brother Lazarus, knowing it's going to be okay 20 minutes later. So if I were God, I would have been like, hey, everybody stop crying. Wait till you see what I'm going to do.
Right.
But he doesn't. He weeps. So he sits with them in their pain. And so that's really, really powerful. So what we've learned is one of the most powerful things you can do if you're going to tell somebody is just that Jesus is there and he'll never leave you and never forsake you. So isn't that funny that, like, now they're finding where neural pathways are created by just experiencing God being in it with you, and how powerful that is. This isn't the world he created for us.
No.
It's not.
You know,
So
Austin and I talk, I'm looking even at your shirt, but grace is a gift, and that gift is
yeah,
presence.
yeah, that's it. That's it. And that's why I have this shirt. This is the past, 36. Got to let it go. Remember it, but got to let it go. And then this is the future, and try to live, stay in the present. And being in that present moment is huge. But just knowing that God was in it with me. Like I said, if I were him, I would have changed my career and I would be in the Hall of Fame. But I'm not. But knowing that he was in it with me was the biggest gift through the highs and the lows. That I learned so much more through going down than I did going up. But packaging it all together, I'm super proud of 14 years in the big leagues, 19 total. And as you said, my wife moved me many times, and she says she still likes me, so I'll take that. Yeah.
Well, I was going to lead into what you just said about. Tell us about your wife, but I want to ask you this: what is it that your wife Kim does that makes you a better man, Paul?
Oh man. Whew. The thing that drives me crazy is one thing that I love so much about her. She doesn't care that I played in the big leagues. She won't let me get away with anything. So in a very graceful way, not somebody that mothers me or gets on me all the time, but somebody that knows if I'm off track and says something, I think brings out the best in me. And we're on the journey together of we both, love Jesus and are passionate about him first. And then I hate ranking things, but if that's not where your focus is at, and you're not getting time with the Lord, or you're not, you have no other choice but to get off track. I mean, we can't do anything apart from him. So that includes, marriage too. And she is very grace giving, and yet she's also very, like I said, she doesn't let me get away with anything. So she has that really nice balance. And we're different. That's good. I mean, we're different. We're just, if we go get ice cream right now and you said, what's your favorite flavor? I'm going to say chocolate chip mint. And that's never going to change. It's going to be chocolate chip mint forever. Well, she may like strawberry on Monday and chocolate chip on Tuesday and mango on Friday. She doesn't know. She doesn't know why she's feeling a certain way at times, or this or that. She's incredibly introspective. She can see someone and know if they're a good person, know where their heart's at within minutes, maybe seconds. And she just knows, her Ezer Kenegdo, which is what, Eve was called. So you guys familiar with that, by the way?
I am not.
You're not. Okay. Are you, you can edit this out later. Are you okay with?
No, go ahead.
No.
So when God created Eve, he said, I will make an Ezer Kenegdo for you. And we've translated it suitable helper, but it actually means helpmate warrior, or it actually means guardian warrior. It doesn't mean suitable helper. And so, so it's used like 13 or 14 other times where the Lord rescues Israel through the Holy Spirit. So it's this guardian rescuer. And so he tells Adam, I'll make you this guardian warrior, this rescuer who's going to, who's going to watch you. So Adam, your job is to watch the garden. She's going to watch you. And so she's blessed with an incredible intuition. And I don't know how she knows. Like, I'll do all my research. I'll be like, yeah, we're going to do this investment. It's a great idea. And she'll go, it's awful idea. I go, what are you talking about? And she'll follow me over the cliff. And I go, you were right. How did you know? And she'll just say, I just knew. So
Mm.
God knows that. And I think that's why, you know, in the New Testament, he says, if you don't listen to your wife, like, your prayers are hindered. Like, don't come running to
Yeah.
me. Like, I've given you an Ezer Kenedgo, you know, like,
Yeah.
you are to, yeah. So it's, so I think a woman represents the mystery of God.
Mm.
And so I've learned to appreciate those gifts over the years. And
Yeah.
now that we've been married for 31 years, I'm like, how do you feel about it? You know, like, I'm with you now. Like, I'm, you know,
Yeah.
whatever you say, and not being a pushover. We push each other, but I highly value her sense of intuition that maybe I didn't as much early on. And so,
Yeah.
I enjoy our marriage. And guys, she almost died 2 years ago.
Oh
So,
my.
she went into
What
septic
happened?
shock. She went into septic shock, and and she almost died. And that's rocked our world. So the machines actually said she did die. Um, and that was a really difficult time in our lives, but it turned out to be wonderful because she made it. And when she made it through, it's like, okay, we really aren't guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know, like, I thought we were going to die like, you know, James Garner in The Notebook. You know, we're going to be in our 90s holding hands in the hospital, and they're going
Right.
to write a
Right.
story about us on the page, you know, front page of the paper. But it's, you know, we're really not guaranteed tomorrow. And so that rocked us. And so I didn't
Yeah.
broadcast for the next 2 years. And now I've just started broadcasting again. And I'm only going to do 40 games. I'm just going to do half the home games,
Yeah.
because she's doing better. But she's in her 3rd year of a 5-year recovery. She had a
Okay.
50% chance of making it when she was in septic shock, is what she went into. And that's a disease where you stop pumping blood because you have an infection. So
Hmm.
your heart doesn't pump blood. And when you don't pump blood, you get no oxygen.
Right.
So every part of your body experiences a lack of oxygen and experiences some sort of shutting down or death, like you shut down a computer, some sort of dying because of the lack of oxygen. So people lose hands, fingers, toes, feet, legs, arms. And thankfully, she got to keep everything. She has some memory issues and some things like that. She had to get help to run the ministry, which is something she did before. So it's changed our lives, but she's still here, and every day is a gift. And yeah, I share one other thing about that because of this
Absolutely.
podcast.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
So she was a really touch and go period for 4 days, and there's a number on the machine. It's called a MAP number. Mean arterial pressure is what it stands for, and it's the amount of pressure that you are pumping blood through the veins. So it's how you are circulating blood. And when you don't have enough mean arterial pressure, you don't get oxygen, you die. So hers was at 47 for an extended amount of time, which is too low. And so she was violently shaking, and I was holding on to her, and they had the paddles, and it was like something out of a movie. And I was, you know, laying on her. It was awful. And when she came to 4 days later, I had cut every deal with God, man. And she didn't want to, she came back and she didn't want to be here anymore. And I was like, I was so like, you know, and she just
Yeah.
said, Paul, like, I was walking with Jesus in the dark. And she said, I had a peace that I've never experienced in my life.
Yeah.
And she said, you have to let me go. And I said, what do you mean? And I'm like, she said, yeah. She says, it's okay. Like, you're going to be fine. And I was like, there's no way I'm telling the docs that I'm not signing anything that says you're not to be resuscitated.
Yeah.
Like I was just like fighting her. And so for a week, man, she was sad, and she would sit and look out the window and ask Jesus for that peace. And
Yeah.
I felt incredibly selfish, um, because I'm thinking about me, and that whole thing, that whole experience changed us. Um, and everybody has their, not everybody, but there's a lot of after coming back from the dead experiences, or but
Yeah.
whatever. And I don't know on what percentage that she died. I don't know, but it was not your typical, experience where somebody wakes up and, um, yeah, so it drastically changed our lives, and we think about it every day of like, hey, how do we want to spend our time?
Right.
And, yeah, and so you mentioned present. We just say, hey, we have today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
How do we want to spend our time today? What do we want to do? We just got back from a trip from Italy.
Mm.
Probably shouldn't have gone, but we just said we're going to live our lives, and we're going to go. And
Yeah.
I took out a policy: if something happened to her medically, everything would be covered. And they have good health care there. We've always wanted to go. We've never been to Europe. So I told my broadcasting team, like, I'll see you in 3 weeks. Like, we're
Your
going,
whole perception
like,
change. Yeah.
you can,
Yeah.
yeah, you can fire me if you want, but I'm going. I'm going with my wife. We're doing something we've always wanted to do. We're going to live our lives. And so we went over there. We saw where the Apostle Paul and Peter were imprisoned in a Mamertine
Oh, cool.
prison right before their
Yeah.
death. There was a road that was from 500 BC. It had the V carved in the rock that led to that.
Yeah.
We saw the Colosseum where awful atrocities, happened.
Yeah.
Sistine Chapel, just a lot of like cool historical things. We were on the Appian Way. We saw the catacombs where Christians were buried because they weren't allowed to be buried in the city.
Yeah.
There's some cool stuff, and we're so glad we went. And we have a new perspective on life after her
Mm.
near-death experience that is a huge blessing. So
Yeah.
that's where
Thank
I'm
you for
at.
sharing that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Austin,
Um,
let's move to legacy if you want to ask him one, and I will too, and then we'll get ready to close.
okay. Um, you know, I'm actually going to ask my own legacy question here. My dad told me a little bit about the ministry that you and your wife do.
Yeah.
What can you? I mean, because that's something that's been on my dad and I's heart. Kind of for hurting athletes or coaches that are in this world that need something called like a rest stop, something where people come and just
Yeah.
kind of recharge and
Hmm.
you remind them of truth in the midst of the lies that they hear on a daily basis in the performance based world we live in. So, can you kind of share your wife and
Yeah.
your ministry and kind of what that's about?
Yeah. We don't, as Christians, and we don't do uh, worship. I don't know, man. I don't really want to put down the church in the way we
Yeah,
do ministry, and I don't want to, but like, it's just tough here. It's just hard here. We're not supposed to be here. This isn't the world God created for us. So even as we try to do ministry and love each other, it's messy. So
yeah,
92% of pastors would do something else if they could. That's
mm,
a big number. That's a big
yeah,
number. So whether God intended us to be in a big building and listen to one person, I don't know. I do know that God intended us to be in fellowship and never give up meeting with one another and be on the
mm,
journey together, where we have small
amen,
group and we share and we have community. So we try to foster that. We try to foster community into the people who are in ministry, who we see. We don't like, hey, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing this wrong, or you should do this, or you should. We don't do any of that. We just serve and love people who serve and love
amen,
people who don't take care of themselves, who don't do a lot of self-care. So we just get people over there and we feed them. We have a walking trail. They're in a cabin. We have days of silence. And it's amazing what God does in the silence. We have places for them to do artwork. We have a labyrinth that they can walk. And stories that we have are pretty profound. And
Wow.
so, yeah, that's what we're into. We're into right now. We didn't start out this way, but we take care of people who are in ministry and who sometimes people forget to serve them and they forget to do their own self-care and take care of themselves. So, yeah.
Amen.
You know,
Thank you.
Paul, as you're talking, there's two major questions that I ask coaches and athletes in this industry. One is, how are you? And I pause and give them a long time, because as we know, we get patent answers of good, doing well. And a lot
Yeah.
of times I'll say,
Fine.
well, now that you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times I'll say, now that you're done lying, how are you? But
Right.
the second one is what you just said, is who's taking care of you?
Yeah.
And as I shared with you and Austin just mentioned, our passion here at Win Awakening is to have a place where, transparency and vulnerability is accepted,
Yeah.
and where value and worth is recognized, and where life is understood. And that's what I heard from your heart today, is that picture for people. And there's a lot of hurting people out there, as you said. So my question before we get ready to close here in a few minutes is this. Paul, as you think back and presently think through all your life right now today, how would you describe what you're hearing from Papa?
Mm. I think for me, just the value of my time and not thinking that I have to do something incredible. Like I'm seeing a lot of value in the mundane. So for the last 2 years, I mean this is a negative towards me. I don't mean this as a positive, but like I've just done the dishes. And it was way out of balance. And, read the book, Brother Lawrence, Practicing the Presence of God. And I was like, oh God, what a great book. He offered up to do the dishes for his Carmelite brothers at the monastery. But I never did that. So something that's said in that book is, whether you are sharing the gospel or tending to the garden, you're in no greater holy act. So if I'm gardening, I'm in no, it's the same as sharing the gospel.
Yes.
Like I'm just being.
Amen.
I'm offering whatever
Yes.
up to the Lord. So I think whether I'm broadcasting or whether I'm at home doing the dishes or whether I'm sitting in silence, I think I've released myself from having to do something the world like sees as important, and
Yeah.
and just being like, so a friend of mine shared me this message with me the other day. It seems like regardless if you are Republican or Democrat, I don't mean any harm here, but a friend of mine the other day, he asked me, and this is really good. He said, if Donald Trump got in his helicopter, President of the United States, and flew to your farm and landed in your pasture, and he got out and came into your house and he did the dishes and then he took your trash out. And I said, Mr. President, what are you doing? And he said, Paul, I just wanted to serve you today. And he got in whatever helicopter Air Force One is, and he flew away. Would you think that's a big deal? And I said, yeah, President of the United States, whether, again, whether you like him or not, that's not the point of this illustration. The point of this illustration is he's a very powerful man, and he's the president of the United States, whether you voted for him or not. And the fact that he came and did the dishes and took the trash out probably would have been media coverage saying, what's going on? How does he have time to do this? And he's, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's the president here.
Yeah.
But so my friend said, what you just confessed to me is it's not the act. It's
Wow.
not what he did, it's who does it.
Wow.
And he goes, you're a child of the king. He goes, you're a big deal because you're a big deal because you're a child of the king. Like, you're
Wow.
a prince. And whatever you do is a big deal because of who you are, not because of what you're doing. And I think the lessons that I've been trying to learn the last 2 years is, and it's really true, is being fulfilled with just serving. Because that's an Emmy award. So I had like 3. I don't mean that to dig myself, but like, never thought I would get an Emmy award. But like, I'm not doing anything greater when I'm talking about how somebody holds their slider. You know what I'm saying? But the world will be like, you're really good at that, man. The way you whatever. And so I can get life from that. I can get attaboys from that. I can get value from that when it's a sham. It's
Right.
really not there. Like, my value, and then I can go feed the poor and do all sorts of things, and the world will go like that for this. But you can do that and not be connected to the Lord.
Amen.
And that's the first thing we talked about in this podcast, is when Jesus says, I never knew you. So for me to do the mundane things in a way that glorifies God, and to feel value from that, and to receive the fact that I'm valued regardless of what I do. We talked about performance-based acceptance earlier, but just to experience that Jesus is enough and I am enough.
Yeah.
Just being his. And what would you have me do with my time? How can I serve today? That's where I'm at right now.
Wow.
Well, Paul, the last thing we do is we call it final words or words of life.
Yeah.
Give you an opportunity to share with our listeners anything that maybe we didn't cover, or that just right now in your heart that you want to share. And then Austin will follow and I'll close us.
Oh, wow. Well, we were talking about marriage. So something that I like to share, since you're an athlete, is the coach John Wooden, who said the greatest inheritance or gift you can leave your kids is to love their mom. So for anybody out there, keeping it simple, that's a huge inheritance and a huge gift. And you can do that even if you're divorced. You can love your kid's mom and treat them with respect. And that's something else that popped up the other day when my kids were talking about us, and it was a really big compliment. So that's my last pitch.
Thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time to share with us. I mean, Dad and I do this podcast, like we say many a times, we're not big time podcasters. We're just people that care about people, want to hear story, and dig into people's hearts and see what God's doing in their lives. I mean, that's really what we're about, and trying to remind people of the truth along the way. And for me, when you ended today, one of the things that jumped out was the extraordinary life is learning how to live in the ordinary. And for me, it's just, we're so deceived into thinking that it's about how many people are viewing me, liking what I'm doing, hearts I'm getting, attaboys, like you said. But it's really about stepping into what God has in front of me in that moment and learning how to be completely present with the people that I'm with in that moment, or the task at hand. And once again, sometimes that leads to getting Emmys, or being an all-star, or sometimes it might be only your wife sees the action that you're doing. And it's just, it was just profound truth. And, it sounds so simple, but, I think we complicate what God's design for us really was. And it's just complete reliance on him to be our life and to be in relationship in a moment by moment basis, and just learning how to be content with where I'm at in this moment and just letting his love flow out of me in a moment by moment basis. So I appreciate your heart. I appreciate just what God's doing with you and your family. And we're thankful for who you are.
Man, I appreciate that.
Paul, as I listen to you today, there's multiple things that come to my mind, but you are an extraordinary work of art. I mean, the things that Papa has done and is doing in your life and just letting you discover, I was sat there and I was just in awe of his work of art in Paul Byrd. The second thing is, you've probably heard this question. My son may be too young, but, I've heard people at times say, if you could ever have lunch with 3 different people, who would they be? Or, questions like that. And I don't know if I can give you a greater compliment, Paul, but I would choose you.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Thank you.
After today, I would choose you. And this will be for off the air for us, but I just want you to know, and Austin's going to know exactly what I'm saying, there is no doubt that the Spirit was meant to speak through you today to me.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
There's many things you shared today that are speaking to this guy right now. And so thank you for that. Austin and I would like to thank you for sharing your story with our listeners at Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time.